All right, friends, we are back and badder than ever. It's been a little hiatus, a little bit of technical problems, but we are back with a whole lot more smack. Welcome to Talking Smack. I'm Bob.
And I'm Jack.
And Jack, nobody talks more smack than the former president of the United States. A little bit earlier today, his new arch nemesis talked some smack. Overbloated and underfacted Alvin Bragg took to the podium after the arraignment of President Donald J. Trump on 34 charges of ridiculousness. I mean, honestly, I've never seen anything quite like this. Neither is anybody else in America because of the fact that he's a former president and also he's the leading contender for the nomination as Republican, for the Republican nomination for president in 2024. Jack, this is a strange time we're in right now.
Yeah, it's a super strange time. And, as somebody who appreciates law and order and wants to advocate for that, I'm always a little bit hesitant and reticent to come out in support of somebody that is on the right just because, it will be viewed as, well, the guy's on the right, so of course you're going to support him. But Bob, I'm sure you'll talk a little bit about the insane number of charges, which I think you've called stacking, and that sounds right.
Yeah, it is.
But I'm going to throw this in, and I hate whataboutism. By the way, I hate going, well, yeah, but this guy did that, because that's like the lowest common denominator, and we teach our kids in kindergarten not to do that. But that being said, I'm old enough to remember a guy by the name of William Jefferson Clinton. Who did some unscrupulous things in the Oval Office, who settled for $850,000 with Paula Jones. And legal experts today say, well, that was different because that was a civil case and those facts were, in public purview. So that wasn't hush money. Well, I'm not an attorney, but I do know that there's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And the spirit of the law to me seems to be two separate standards, right? Because I remember back then, I was pretty plugged in. And I remember most mainstream media outlets saying, hey, whatever the president does, as long as it doesn't impact his ability to preside, who cares, right? Let's just move on. And, if he made an agreement with another consenting adult and they came to terms, then let's let it go. Fast forward to 2023, whole different ballgame. And, that's the problem that I have is if we're going to preach law and order, then let's have equal weights and equal measures. We don't.
Well, no, we don't. We have a two-tiered system of justice. And just to let everybody know, as we start this episode, we're just minutes away from being joined by the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee and Ohio's 4th Congressional District Representative, Jim Jordan. He's going to respond to the Alvin Bragg press conference today that was held after the ridiculous arraignment of President Trump on just unbelievably weak and flimsy charges, which we'll get into. But, Jack, to your point, I think you're going a little too far back, and I think you got the wrong Clinton. We don't have to go back that far to find something that's really a precedent here. If we're talking about what the allegation that Alvin Bragg is levying by way of this indictment of President Donald Trump, that he lied on and falsified business records to cover up something that might be damaging to his political campaign, and in order to kind of deceive the American voters. That was the way he described this whole thing today. Well, let's go back to the same 2016 year, and let's talk about what his opponent Hillary Clinton did. Now, she didn't have to pay somebody to cover up for her, but she did. She paid for somebody to get information on the opponent. She and the DNC were fined in 2022, about a year ago in March of 2022, as the culmination of a long investigation of what was done prior to the actual 2016 election and what carried into the 2017 year of President Trump as president of the United States. What she did and what the DNC did was they combined and spent about $1 million, and they gave it to a powerful Democratic law firm named Perkins Coie. They then hired Fusion GPS to dig for dirt on Donald Trump to help her, what? Sway the American voters. And then Fusion GPS hired Christopher Steele, the British spy, the former British spy for whom the dossier is named. So they paid with campaign funds They paid to solicit a false and phony dossier intended to what? Fool and sway and cover up for the American voters what was really going on in that election. They got busted for it. By the time it was all said and done, they were found guilty of it. And the Clinton campaign and the DNC paid a combined $113,000 in fines for mislabeling payments that went to Fusion GPS. They were campaign funds. So it's an almost identical type of situation here, except that Donald Trump didn't try to break the law and hire somebody to produce a false dossier. If he did anything wrong here at all, in trying to quote unquote, cover up something that might be embarrassing to him by paying these women to, there are two women involved in this whole thing, by the way, Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, paying them not to say anything. Well, that's not illegal unless it did come from the campaign fund. And if it did come from a campaign fund, what should happen to him? The same thing that happened to Hillary Clinton, a fine a few years later. But he's sitting before a jury. Well, technically, he's sitting before a judge right now, and they're trying to put him on trial before a jury for his freedom. And obviously, we know this isn't about convicting him at a criminal court to take away his freedom. It's to stop him from being the front runner in the Republican primary to run for president again.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm going to say this tongue in cheek. Hillary Clinton and the DNC screwed the entire country. I think that whole episode precipitated in years of investigations, millions of dollars, and the weaponization of certain government entities and certainly the media against Donald J. Trump. And, Donald J. Trump allegedly screws two people and consenting adults, and he's going to go to jail for it. Look, I say that tongue in cheek.
Meanwhile, Joe Biden is screwing 335 million people and getting away scot-free. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, and Hunter Biden is paying women for sex and smoking crack and, cutting his dad in on deals that probably make it impossible for him to be impartial in places like Ukraine and China. But, those are things that nobody wants to report in the mainstream, or at least report in their entirety. So, again, two separate systems. If you are a progressive and you are on the left, then it certainly feels and looks and smells like a rat. Like you have, frankly, you have a system that's good for you, but it smells like a rat to the people that are on that second track. Which, I don't know, and this is a question that maybe we'll ask Congressman Jordan. I don't know if you're an average American who goes to bed tonight and thinks, I like the Constitution, I like law and order, I probably have some conservative blood in me. Do you feel good about where the country is? Do you feel good about your ability to go to work and to actually, make good on your First Amendment right to free speech and interaction? Do you feel good about your kids and the future that they're going to have in this country? I don't. And I think that's really today for me. That's how it impacts me. I look at this and I go, what do I say to my 10-year-old daughter? What do I say to her about this country that I claim is so great, and that if you work hard and you do the right thing, you get ahead and you can live the American dream? It sure the hell doesn't look like that anymore.
Well, but I didn't need today for that, Jack. I didn't need today to happen to answer all of those questions in the negative. That no, I'm not comfortable with the way things are. No, I'm not comfortable that my kids are getting great educations, that their kids are going to get great educations. They're going to have the opportunity to grow and survive and thrive the way we did as we grew up in this country. No, I didn't need today to make that happen. This country is a train wreck under its current leadership. It is a train wreck under its current education system. It's a train wreck because right now, the trans movement in this country, not the LGBTQ overall as a whole movement, the trans movement is the biggest threat to childhood this country has faced maybe ever. And this is something, and if we say that, we're in serious trouble, we're phobes, and we're going to get canceled. So, Jack, I go to bed every night not feeling very comfortable about this country. But what I saw today, what made today a little bit different, and a week ago when they announced the indictment, is the levels to which they will stoop, the depths to which they will go to advance their evil agenda. Now, I'm not going to, look, I don't like never-Trumpers. I despise never-Trumpers. They're closed-minded individuals that I think are just so off kilter. They shouldn't even talk politics. They shouldn't even talk about elections. But I will tell you this. I'm also not an only Trumper. I think only Trumpers are just as dangerous, quite frankly. You have to have an open mind. And regardless of whether you are for Trump, if you're going to vote for this guy, or against Trump and you like somebody else in the conservative primary, you better be outraged at what is being done to him. Because if they can do this, how many people live in this country? 330
330 some million. Well,
he's right.
Legally,
I just saw
I don't
that.
know. There's probably 50 million illegal immigrants, so 380 million.
I just saw that Mr. Jordan is ready, so I apologize. But I was going to say there's 330 million people in this country, and there have been, billions in the course of this country's history. And guess what? Only 46 of them have been able to call themselves president of the United States. One of them is Donald Trump. And if they can do this to one of those 46 men, they can do anything they want to you or me. All right, I'll leave it there now so we can bring in our guest, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee in the United States Congress. He is the 4th Congressional District Representative in the state of Ohio, and he is one of the champions of justice, I believe, in our Congress. He is a strong supporter of President Trump, and I know he's got reactions to what we saw today. Congressman Jim Jordan, thanks for joining us on Talkin Smack.
Guys.
How are you, sir?
I'm fine. Good to be with you this evening.
Thank you, sir.
Congressman, I know Jack's got some very specific questions
Sure.
for you, but I want to open up just by giving you, kind of like we did on the radio side this morning, I want to give you some latitude here. You watched that arraignment, and then you watched the press conference, which I still shake my head at, from Alvin Bragg announcing these 34 counts in this indictment and stacking the things the way that he did. I want to give you latitude here and just give us your reaction to what you saw take place today from that podium.
Well, I mean, I think most Americans have this reaction. It's a sad day. I mean, first of all, it's just what they've done to President Trump. They spied on his campaign. They tried to impeach him twice. They raided his home, and now they indict him on a campaign finance violation when he didn't spend campaign funds, as you were talking about earlier, Bob. So that's ridiculous. But I think, and I said this earlier on your radio show, I think it's bigger than that. I think this is really an effort to go, as you said, if they can go after President Trump, they can go after one of only 46 individuals who've held the highest office in the land. Imagine what they can do to any one of us. And we're seeing that. I don't think it's an accident that in the last month, we have seen the FTC ask a private company, who are the journalists you're talking to, naming 4 personally. 2 of those journalists testify in front of our committee, and Democrats ask them, who are your sources? At the same time they're asking that question, the FBI is knocking on one of those journalists' door. Talk about intimidation. And then, of course, we had what happened today, indictment and arraignment of a former president, I think all for all in the effort to truly interfere with the most important election we have, which is for election of President of the United States, because President Trump is winning in every single poll. So it is truly a sad day because, as Kim Strassel said a few weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal, once you cross this Rubicon, no one had ever gone here before, but once it's happened, now any local DA will probably be able to bootstrap up some local charge going after some political opponent in the other party.
Congressman Alvin Bragg, he's a New York district attorney, not a federal judge. Now, Congress does have a check on federal judges that are appointed. What can Congress do? Do you have a check on him? And if so, what does that look like?
Well, we think there's definitely a federal interest here, because we've written Mr. Bragg a couple times. He's responded back, but he conceded in his latest response back to us that they did use federal funds in this particular indictment, in this particular prosecution effort. We know that this all grew out of the special counsel investigation. So that's a federal statute, the special counsel statute. And then, of course, as I said before, we think this is direct interference in a federal election. Because remember the storyline here. The DOD wouldn't bring this case. The former district attorney, Cy Vance, wouldn't bring this case. Alvin Bragg, when he gets elected, says he's not going to bring this case because no one can trust Michael Cohen, which is obvious. But then all of a sudden he changes his mind. And he changes his mind, I believe, because President Trump announced he was running for president, and 2 of his assistants leave that office, go create a big stir amongst the people on the left, and there's all kinds of pressure, political pressure put on Mr. Bragg to then bring this charge against President Trump. So that is our concern. And so we've said everything's on the table. We want to get answers. One of the first places I think we'll probably try is Mr. Pomerantz, who's now left. He's the individual who resigned and created this stir. He's left, written a book, talked about this, done interviews about this. We think he may be the first place we go to try to get some of the answers.
Congressman Jordan, can you explain in layman's terms, the best you can, what they are accusing President Trump of when they say that he falsified business records and thus used campaign funds that he did not mark as such to pay, Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, and that was an attempt to sway the American voters or to cheat the American voters out of information they needed. So essentially saying that was the underlying crime here,
right,
that he's using to stack misdemeanors up together to create a felony.
My understanding is the 34 counts are the 11 invoices, 12 vouchers, and then 11 checks that were paid out, that the way they ran these checks and then paid people. And I think what they're trying to say is that in effect was a sort of an in-kind campaign contribution. Mm-hmm. But, as we pointed out, there was in-kind because there was no campaign funds spent. So I think it's pretty darn ridiculous. Every legal scholar I've seen weigh in on this, both left and right, seem to say that this makes really not much sense. Who would bring this case? And as we pointed out, the Department of Justice wouldn't bring it, and the previous DA wouldn't bring it, and even Alvin Bragg wouldn't bring it. And I think that one of the key elements here is also just the fact that their star witness, Michael Cohen, has been, he went to prison for lying. But we also went back and looked at our records. He lied 6 times. We actually did a referral. We don't do these often. We did a referral back in 2019 when Michael Cohen testified in front of the Oversight Committee to the Justice Department, pointing out the 6 different occasions when he lied during that hearing. So I think that was also part of why there was a reluctance to bring this from all these folks. But now, obviously, Alvin Bragg is moving forward.
Jack, if I may, a quick follow-up on that question, because it's related. If what they're saying that President Trump was trying to do is pay Stormy Daniels or have Michael Cohen pay Stormy Daniels to keep quiet allegations of an affair in order, again, to deceive the voters. That was the language that he used here. What and how do we describe what just happened in this past election with the Hunter Biden laptop? 2 weeks before the actual election, nobody paid anybody to keep that quiet because they didn't have to. They had the FBI and the social media platforms and the mainstream media do it for them. They buried something that would have been very, very damaging to the Biden campaign, and this is what they're accusing Donald Trump of doing.
Yeah, and they had the 51 former intel officials sign that letter that sort of became the final stamp on keeping this quiet. Here's the irony. Today, while this is happening in Manhattan, we were actually sitting in a transcribed interview with Michael Morrell, the guy who put that whole 51 put those people together and put that statement together in that very short time frame between October 14th, when the New York Post story comes out, and October 20th, when these 51 folks put that statement out there. And of course, that statement was used by Joe Biden in the debate on October 22nd, 2 days later. So, that it is sort of the I think the irony there, and again, underscoring what we've said now for several years. This crazy double standard that exists, where there's one set of rules for the politically connected and the so-called elite here in D.C., the swamp, and a different set of rules for us regular folks or people like President
Congressman
Trump.
Jordan, Kevin McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy said Alvin Bragg is attempting to interfere with our democratic process. And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said he believes Donald Trump will have a fair trial. What do you say? Do you think President Trump will get a fair trial?
Well, we hope our system works that way, but I think it's going to be tough in Manhattan, for goodness sake. I assume the Trump legal team is going to try to get this moved. I think they'll probably try to get it dismissed because, get it tossed out right away. But if it moves further, I assume they're going to try to get a change of venue and get it somewhere else, some other jurisdiction, because what is I think it's like 90-10. Democrat there, and it's unfortunate because it shouldn't be that way. You should be able to, regardless of politics, should be able to look at the facts and the evidence. But it seems like everything has gotten so polarized that it's that may be difficult. So you'd like to at least have it, if it's going to go to trial, you'd like to at least have it happen in somewhere where it's at least 50-50.
I saw one report today after the Bragg press conference saying something to the effect of him wanting to hold this trial in January of 2024. He wants to wait 8 more months-ish and have this thing as the actual 2024 primary season gets underway and votes start to be counted in caucus and primary states. He can't let this thing drag out for another 8 or 9 months before they actually have this, can he?
Well, you would think not, but that's my understanding too. December 4th, I think, is the next hearing. Trial is, I think, believed to be scheduled, as you pointed out, Bob, for January of next year. So January next year, we've got the Iowa caucuses. We're going to be in the middle of a campaign. And the way presidential politics works in modern America is the campaign is now like, a year and a half, 2 years long anyway. So, yeah, that makes no sense, and it's why Speaker McCarthy called it what you and I've called it, what several people call it. This is interfering in our most important election, the election for commander-in-chief, the election for the chief executive officer in the United States. That's why I said it's a sad day.
Congressman, just entertain me for a minute here. I want to run through like three things, and I want to ask, what do you tell the average American who's tracking what you're doing in the Judiciary Committee? Just in the past few weeks, you've uncovered the IRS potentially targeting a journalist who's going against the grain, Customs and Border Protection disciplining agents who were falsely accused of whipping immigrants by Democrats. And then the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, which is tied to the World Economic Forum, is demonetizing and eliminating disfavored content. What do you say to the average American who looks at all of that and goes, what do I do? I mean, are our days numbered? What do we do?
Well, no, you elect President Trump in 2024, someone who's proven that he'll come fight for the American people, fight for those principles and values that make our country special, who will do what he told us he was going to do what he said he was going to do. No one did it better than him. So that's how you change things in our country, is you do it on election day. And I think people are going to be motivated to go do that, particularly in light of what they've seen and what you just described. What we can do inside Congress is we can put the facts on the table, and then we can propose legislation. Think about here's a possible thing that we want to maybe bring forward legislatively. If someone's going to do this, we're going to have a local DA go after a president. Maybe we should say, if that happens, it shouldn't, but if that happens, then you can't just do this in Manhattan at some local court. You got to remove it to federal court. Just maybe that's one legislative change we can do. So one small thing we can do. But there's other things I think we can do legislatively to stop these agencies going after the American people, the people they're supposed to serve. And then I do think the appropriations process is becoming even more important, that we use that power of the purse to try to get control of some of these agencies who are frankly out of control. And we're definitely going to look at that as we move forward.
Congressman, one question I forgot to ask you on the radio this morning, and it needs to be addressed. The judge did say, for now, there will be no gag order on President Trump, but warned the president and his team, if there's too many more things like some of the Truth Social posts that the president has made, he may impose one. How could that possibly be done in the middle of a presidential campaign?
Right. I mean, that's a First Amendment, whether it's a presidential campaign or not. That seems to me to be a First Amendment violation, for goodness sake. But when you think about it, this is the former president of the United States and the current leading candidate in the presidential race for 2024 to say, watch what you say. I mean, come on. I mean, this is America. Let's let people make their case to the American people, and let's let we, the people, decide who's going to be in office for us. I think I said this on your radio show today earlier, Bob, but I know I've covered it before, but this is the part that bugs me so much. 2016, they spied on his campaign. 2018, it was the Mueller investigation. Mm-hmm. 2020, they suppressed the Hunter Biden story. 2022, they raided his home 91 days before the election. And in 2024, they indict him and aren't going to go to trial until January of 2024. I mean, maybe once, just stay out of it. Let the left stay out of it. Let we, the people, decide who we want representing us in the Congress, who we want leading us as the President of the United States. Let we, the people, decide, and just quit trying to put your finger on the scale and weigh in on these elections that are supposed to be decided by the American people.
Congressman, that was a hell of a list, but excuse me if we're pointing out you missed two of them. Sham impeachment number 1 and sham impeachment number 2. Add those to all of the things that have been done to persecute this president. Again, I don't care if you're not a Trump supporter. If you are a believer in justice for all, an equal application of justice, and a single-tiered system of justice, not a two-tiered system of justice, with Democrats deciding on who's on which tier, then you have to defend President Trump in this case. There's just there's no two ways about it.
And again, I think regular Americans who have good common sense, like the people of this country do, they see that all. I would add all. I just thought of one too. As you juggle. So they spy on his campaign. They do 2 impeachments. They tried to use the 25th Amendment. Remember that one?
Yep.
There were people that introduced that, and then of course then it was everything else. Raid on his home. Now this indictment based on a campaign finance violation where he didn't even spend campaign funds. it is ridiculous that we even have to talk about this because you never thought you would see this kind of stuff going on in America. You just never thought you would.
He is U.S. Representative Jim Jordan, and he represents Ohio's 4th Congressional District. He's chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. And Congressman Jordan, I had a chance to rewatch your national championship match with John
golly.
Smith from Oklahoma State. And I
Yeah.
just want to encourage you, keep going after it
Okay.
where you are the way that you went after it then. Thank you for
Thank
everything
you,
that
guys.
you're doing, sir.
You bet.
I
Thanks for what you
appreciate it.
guys do. We appreciate it. Take care, brother.
Thank you,
All right,
Congressman.
thanks.
Always a pleasure. All right, that's Jim Jordan. I didn't know we were wrapping there. I had one more for him because, and Jack, we can talk about it. I don't need him to answer this. It was going to be just an opinion question anyway. But can you see any possibility of Trump's attorneys allowing this to go to a jury trial, whether they get a change of venue or not? That in the middle of a primary season, if they start this thing in January, they're going to have Donald Trump sitting in a courtroom listening to witnesses talk not only about his payments, but Jack, they're going to call every material witness they can think of in this case. And that would include Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels. And they will have evidence or testimony about the legitimacy of the affairs or the one-nighters or whatever it was. Everything would be incredibly biased and embarrassing, and for again, the leading candidate for the presidential nomination for the Republican Party. They cannot have a jury trial. They cannot have witnesses bringing all of that stuff up. It's going to open the books on everything. So one of two things is going to happen here. This is my opinion, Jack, and I want yours. I was going to ask the congressman too. Either they're going to get a dismissal of this case on the simply based on the lack of merits that have been put forth by Alvin Bragg. Remember, this is a DA who has spent his entire first year and almost a half in office taking felonies and knocking them down to misdemeanors for violent criminals in the streets of New York City, in Manhattan. And then when it comes to Donald Trump, just the opposite. He's taking misdemeanors and stacking them to create felonies. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
so let me ask you, let me give you my two things and then tell me which one you think is more likely. They're going to get it kicked, or President Trump's going to have to plead. He's going to have to plead no contest to it, pay a fine, which would probably be the terms of the plea. There will be, obviously, we know jail time, but he's going to have to plead just to avoid sitting through a jury trial in 2024 as he's trying to become president of the United States. Those are the only two outcomes here, I think. What do you say?
Well, I'm going to say 3 or 4 things very quickly. In this country, for good and for bad, anyone can sue anyone else. And if you've spent any time in the domestic and juvenile court system, whether it's through custody or divorce, you know that, and you know how ugly and out of control that can get. Now, imagine that being played out in the middle of a U.S. presidential election. It's unfathomable, isn't it? But number 2, the change of venue, the judge is going to have to rule on that. I have no idea how this judge will rule. My gut tells me that it will probably not be kicked to another venue. I think you could make a very, very valid argument that you're not being judged by a jury of your peers. But, I think a lot differently than most people. So I'm not putting my money on that. I do believe.
When I say kicked, by the way, I didn't mean kicked out of to a different jurisdiction.
You meant kicked to another.
I mean dismissed. Dismissed. Kick the charges.
Okay.
They're going to drop the charges. Judge is going to rule there's not enough evidence here to proceed to a trial. They're going to drop the have the charges dismissed. That's what I mean.
Yeah. Well, let me, and I don't know, I don't know what the civil procedure is here. But if I were a Trump attorney, I would do a couple of things. I would talk about how Alvin Bragg is a rogue DA, and money, $1 million after he announced he was running, found its way into his campaign through a third-party PAC. Now, guess who put $1 million into that PAC? George Soros. Now, if you go out on the internet and you look up like the Washington Post fact checkers or whatever, they try to split the legal hairs and say, well, no, the money funneled through this group to go into this guy. And then you go, well, wait a minute. Didn't Larry Householder just get arrested for that? Didn't Larry Householder just get found guilty for having money filter in through a third party dark money group and then taking that money and doing things? That was called bribery. But in this case, it's not called bribery. How is that? Well, that's the argument that I would make if I were a Trump attorney, but I'm not an attorney. We'll see how it plays out. But to me, it's very clear that Alvin Bragg is a rogue Soros-funded attorney, and you hit it. You hit the nail on the head. He has taken serious crimes and dropped them so that criminals can be on the street, and now he's going to gin up, multiple counts to try to get, a show circus so that President Trump can look bad in the public purview again. At any rate, I do want to make sure before we stop, Bob, that we thank the Freedom Foundation. Go to freedomfoundation.com and make sure that you check out what they're doing. They have opt-out today, which allows government employees to make sure that their money doesn't go to support unions that are just vehemently opposed to everything they stand for. So check out the freedomfoundation.com, and thank you, Freedom Foundation, for supporting Talkin' Smack with Bob and Jack.
I'll second that. Thank you to the Freedom Foundation, and thanks to everybody who watches and listens, and most importantly, shares Talkin' Smack. Put it on your social media, put a link on your Facebook wall, put a link on your Twitter feed, wherever it is that you can, Truth Social and more, to let everybody know we're here, because we're bringing you people like Jim Jordan, and we're bringing you the stuff you need to know, honestly, like very few others in the podcast world are. So make sure you share this with others, and we certainly appreciate that. So we're just scratching the surface of this whole thing. Obviously, today being indictment day / technically arraignment day, but there's going to be a lot more coming up on Talkin' Smack with Bob and Jack, so make sure you keep checking back for the next episode, and we certainly appreciate that. I'm Bob.
And I'm Jack.
And we're Talkin' Smack. See you next time.